Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the worst football card designs of 1992. And this the reason that for me, 1992 is always a blank spot in my memory because this was not a good year for football cards, and I'm a football guy. So it's difficult for me to remember that basketball, hockey, baseball, those were actually better years in 92 than they'd been in 91. In the case of football, that was very much not the case. And it was kind of the product of just how much innovation was going on in 1990 and 91 in football. There was such a surge of creativity that 1992 didn't really have a natural place for the companies to go to, whereas in many other places they did have some places to expand to. But it's really not an excuse for what happened in 1992. It's unfortunately the case of 1990 and 91 were so good for football that 92 was going to be difficult. And sadly, the best card designs of 1991 all took a serious hit. It's just the way that it happened in football. So for me, the best way to look at 1992 is to kind of say it's almost like a slight hint of the 1970s. Almost nothing of 1992 was bad, but it was boring, it was bland. There just wasn't much going on. There were a few really good sets, but it just didn't have the same excitement and the same vigor that we'd already seen. So I am pretty hard on the 1992 card designs because there just is no excuse. They should have been better. And so for this, it was difficult putting together this list because there are a lot of card sets that are big disappointments. And even the fact that 4 different companies got started in making football cards, so you had some new breaths of life, even with that, a card like Playoff just wasn't all that great. It had the potential to be great. It would need to get to that point, but it was all built on technology. Now, I don't put Playoff in this category because that technology was pretty cool. But still, narrowing down the bottom 5 became the bottom 8. And the reason for that is I like to do an honorable mention, sometimes maybe a second. Well, in this case, there are 3 cards that for me are such disappointments I can't let them off the hook. Now, you're not going to see Topps on this list because while I think the Topps baseball set was a major disappointment, I think the Topps football set actually kind of worked. Sometimes one sport just reads better than the others, and in 1991, the Topps football set was really lousy, but the baseball set was good. Well, in 92, I think that the Topps football set was good, and the Topps baseball set was a disappointment. Regardless, you're not going to see that, and shockingly, you're not going to see Fleer either, because while it's not a great card design, it's actually a pretty okay card design. It's, as long as you're not looking at the rookie cards, the Fleer cards actually do hold up. But that doesn't mean that Fleer's off the hook because I'm kicking off these 3 honorable mentions with Ultra. The problem with Ultra... Okay, is Ultra better than 1991? Well, unfortunately, the answer is kind of, because the card technology is a lot better. The card back is fantastic. The card front... You're noticing that I'm speechless. In baseball, I think that their card actually worked pretty well, but in football, it really comes down to the bottom, that little angled section down at the bottom where for 1992, they leaned into marble. Marble was the big thing for Ultra. And so down at the bottom, they have marble, but they turned it green because of the football field, which that makes sense. The problem is, for most of these cards, the field is the bottom of the image too, which means that it runs together and it's not the same color. The color for the marble that they chose is just not a good green. And so when you look at the card, it actually almost feels like the image is running down to the base. And where this becomes a problem is the fact that the marble is not grass, so it doesn't read as grass, and thus it looks out of focus. So automatically your mind starts to catch up on out of focus images. And then the background is kind of blurred in order to make the image stand out, or the image of the player stand out, which is fine. That's not a problem, except the player's image is not super crisp. And so the player is not super crisp. The bottom of the card is making your eye think that everything's out of focus, and so the card reads out of focus. All of these cards read this way. Plus, they kind of blend together. None of the players stand out on these cards. I mean, you look through, it's so hard to find a player who actually stands out. And then you have like the logo that blends in, and everything in this card is just kind of a muddled mess. Nothing about the card is good. Everything you need is going to be, it's there. In 1993, they would make the same card, but it would be wildly different because they made the card right. In this case, they just didn't. And so this card is just an abysmal failure. The only reason I'm not talking about this in the actual list of 5 is because it's a great card back. But if the card back's all you got, you don't have anything. So this is a disappointment, primarily because I can't even really say that it's better than 1991. I mean, technically it is, but the football set, for some reason, was just a failure. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum is Pacific. And the reason I have Pacific here is because technically it's better than 1991. The cardstock is better. The design is very meticulous. It's very masterfully crafted. It has everything that it needs to be great. The problem is there's nothing distinctive about the card. The 91 card is very distinctive. The 92 is about as boring as it gets. They just have this little strip on the side. That's it. Now, it does have a nice color fade. I do like the helmet down at the bottom. I like the way that those pieces come together. And like I said, it's meticulously crafted. It feels like it's a really nice card. It's just not memorable in any way. And that white border is kind of the main culprit. I mean, really, the main culprit is that dumb stripe down the side. I don't know why anybody did stripes down the side, but they did. But the white border just took whatever potential the card had and it threw it out the window. Thankfully, this would be the last time that Pacific would use a white border around the outside. So there is that. But while this card is wildly better than 1991, it's also not nearly as good as 1991. And that's the thing, is it does make a forward step, but that forward step goes nowhere. So I can't let it off the hook. And then likewise, score. Now, score for football, I would love to put this way down at toward the bottom of the list. But that is because, in my mind, to this day, I still think that the 91 football set is one of the great ones. I mean, one of the great ones. And then this is how they followed it up. And what's weird is the fact that this is basically like 91 baseball. And 92 baseball is like 91 football. It's like they took the sets and they just swapped them. Now, the reason I always remember this card as being so terrible is because the borders do run together. It's very bold, very, very bold. And it just doesn't feel like it should really be a part of the family of score. It would fit with the 89 score set, but 90 and 91 are so much better than this that I just don't think that it is an improvement until I take a look at the card and I go, okay, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's designed for kids, but it's designed for kids. And I have to shift my mind and go, okay, so we're out of the beautiful color fades of those really grown-up cards that were before, and now we're just making something bright, flashy, something that looks like a magazine insert. That's really the best way to describe it. So I want this to be on the list, but at the end of the day, when I take time to look at it and I'm honest with myself, I can't quite put it there. But as far as the list, I got to kick that off with one that really tears my heart out, which is Action Packed. Again, you're going to hear a lot of sighs from me in this video because that's what this year is. It is a big disappointment. Action Packed in 1990 had too much gold foil. So they got rid of the gold foil in 91, just used it as a little accent. Great. Then in 92, they did another big stupid stripe on the side. Like I said, that's not a good way to go. It's so tough to make it work, and they did not make it work. They put too much gold foil on it. And the images are great in the set. That's why I keep sighing, because I want this card to be great. Trust me, I really want this card to be great, but it's just not. And on top of that, the stripe isn't even consistent, because the stripe corresponds to where the seam is on the back of the card. And the seam, it's important for the seam to be on either side of the card, because if all the way that the cards are made, the seam causes one side to get kind of kicked up a little bit. So all the cards get tilted if the seams are all the same. So what you do is you swap the seams back and forth so that every other card, the seam is on the other side. You have this card tilted, 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 and they even each other out, and you have a whole stack of cards that are all straight. That's the idea, and I don't mind that. The problem is these aren't every other card. they have them in groups, and so that means that the border's bouncing all over, back and forth. If they designed it for card pages, then okay, I could have worked with that, but they didn't. So instead of having any consistency between the cards or the way they read in a card page, etc., it's all over the place, which means that that bold side on the card, it's just this ever-changing distraction. And it really kills a great card. Again, like Score, this is judged more heavily because of what an amazing card they made in 1991 and how they absolutely dropped the ball in 1992. So yeah, this is there's a lot of that. And then for number 4, I'm going with Pro Set, but not Series 1, Series 2. This is a unique case where Series 1 and Series 2 actually look different, so they're basically different cards. That's what takes the 19 major card sets of football in 1992, which is a lot of card sets, and puts it at 20. So the reason that the card design changed was because Pro Set had to reinvent itself and basically earn back the card audience. So 1992's Series 2 in Pro Set was a way of saying, this isn't Lud Denny's company, we are a new company, we are everything you wish that we were. And we look nothing like what he had made, which went along with, we're not giving you good designs like Lud Denny's company always did. So the 1992 set starts off with another stupid stripe on the side of the card. I actually collected this card en masse because nobody bought them, so they were dirt cheap. So I was throwing together sets like crazy. And I did it out, it was a rote process. It was just an automatic process putting these sets together because there is nothing endearing about the card except the images are great. It's still Pro Set. The images are still great. You just don't notice them because the stripe is so stinking bold. It's really frustrating. It's like in 1994 when everybody got rid of the border. In 1992, everybody put a stripe on the side of the card. And this one is the most obnoxious by a long shot. And it really does, it's worse than the other ones because of the fact that the image, Action Pact had really great images too. But there's just no excuse for this. So here we have number 4. As we move to 1993, this is another one that tears my heart out because I love Collector's Edge. And they actually made a really nice card in 1992. I mean, this was as fancy as you're going to find a card. Truly. These cards had protectors in them. This was before Finest started having protectors in their packs. These packs all came with protectors protecting one card from another. And they were vinyl, which means that they were pretty much supposed to be bulletproof, but they still protected the cards because these were the high-end cards. This took the whole concept of Upper Deck, and it took it to another level. Unfortunately, the card design, while very meticulously crafted, I love what they tried to do, it ultimately didn't quite work. And that's because the vinyl plastic quality of the card limits the ability for the card itself to read in the way that a glossy or semi-glossy card would normally read. There's a texture to it, but there's also a way that the colors come through that just kind of softens the power that they have. And I don't really know what they could have done to make the card better. I look at the card and everything that it needs to be is there, except at the end of the day, the image is too dark. That's the biggest problem of it. But even if the images were brighter and stood out more, it still wouldn't help. The card has nothing distinctive about it. This is one of those cards you may never have seen simply because you never noticed it even though it was right in front of your face. And that's not good for a company that is trying to introduce itself, and it's not good for a card that is supposed to be the high-end, really sought-after card. So it fails in all of those measures, but mainly it fails because when I look at the card, everything it needs to be, it's just flat out not. It is a major, it doesn't do well. I also have to say I don't like the card back. So all that out of the way, now we move on to number 2. Which, what else could it be? Bowman. And Bowman doesn't really need much of an explanation. This was a card that took the 91 design and, as far as I'm concerned, made a step back from that. It's not so much that it's worse as much as when they tried to improve it, they didn't improve it in the right ways. And it's just, it's not good. The foil cards are kind of cool, but that's only because they're different. That's the only good thing about the foil cards. Otherwise, these cards just are... Here's an important thing for me. Whenever I think of 1992, this is actually the first card that pops into my mind. So it gives you a pretty good idea of why I'm so down on the set. But at any rate, yeah, Bowman in 1992, not good. But it pales in comparison to number one, the card that I consider to be truly a terrible card, which is All World. And there's a reason why most of you have never heard of All World, and that's because there was never a second year. All World already existed making sports cards. They were making racing cards, and they were making CFL cards. That was kind of the big thing for active sports. That was really where they were putting their energy. And in 1992, they made their CFL set, and they wanted to also make an NFL set. Yes, these are officially licensed NFL cards. This is a part of the regular NFL football card world. It's just one set they did, and the reason they designed it this way is because the CFL cards, they have a big Canadian flag at the top of that, opposite the American card, which has a big American flag, and that's kind of the design. They didn't do any design to the extent that there's almost nothing on this card that even says All World. You got to read the fine print on the back to know who in the world made it. They have no logo. The closest they have to a logo is the American flag, which just, it's a card with no design, thin band around the outside with some really good images. I really do think they did a great job with images, but that flag is so bold, it's so powerful, and it's not integrated into anything that it just utterly fails. Now, if they had instead done a flag that was like team related, that might have actually been kind of cool. Or maybe state flags. That would have been, it still wouldn't have looked great, but at least it would have added some interest to this. But instead, the whole card is just built around that big flag that doesn't fit, that's not well proportioned, etc., etc. I really don't know what else to say. I mean, this is one of the all-time biggest fails of a card design. And there's no better year for it to fit into than 1992. So here it is, and that's what I have for my list. The follow-up videos to this are going to be basketball and hockey, and for those, I'm going to do a single video for them because there aren't enough cards to split into multiple groups. And so then after that, I am going to be doing a full worst of across all of the four sports. You better believe there's going to be a very strong presence of football cards on that total worst of. But at any rate, this is where I see the bottom level of the ridiculously voluminous number of options that there were in 1992 for those of us in football. Not the best year for us collecting, but at any rate, so that is my list. And if you haven't checked out the other videos that I've done, I've been doing these rankings for quite a while. Check those out. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and thank you very much for watching.